Dr. Schwartz, we'll start with you and ask, how do you define bullying?
Well, of course, there's probably lay definitions and more scientific definitions. We tend to use a fairly robust but specific working definition where we talk about bullying being exposed repeatedly and over time to negative efforts by one or more persons to inflict some sort of harm or pain upon a person who may or may not be, a person who's powerless or might be out, might be struggling with that relationship. But it's one where it's certainly a repeated experience of being targeted by others.
And Austen, you can speak to this specifically. You were the target of bullying when you returned to school after recovering from a dirt bike crash. Alberta Primetime viewers, many of whom probably remember your story. We profiled it. Maybe if you could, what were your experiences with bullying?
When I got out of the hospital, I'd gone through rehabilitation for just over a month, a lot of learning how to walk, learning how to talk, everything all over. And when I got back to my high school, nobody really understood what a brain injury was. Everybody figured, he had a brain injury. There's got to be something wrong with him now. He's got to be retarded or something. So I dealt with a lot of my friends kind of stepping away from me and stepping down. And they weren't really sure how to handle me now. I didn't come back, and I couldn't do the sports I did. I was the same guy, but I had to step down from doing all the things I did. So what I dealt with on a daily basis was along with losing friends, was hearing the term, "Oh, there goes a retard," or "There's a vegetable walking down the hallway," or hearing, "Yeah, this is the vegetable," and it escalated to being shoved up against lockers, which was particularly scary for me, knowing that any slight hit to the head could be, in this time, I could be back in the hospital. It didn't take a whole lot at that time while I was recovering.
So you've obviously recovered. You've excelled past that now. You're a public speaker.
I am, yes.
Your secrets.
Pardon me?
Your secrets.
Yeah, so when I finally, it went on for a couple months at school, and I came home, my parents started noticing differences in my behavior. I was becoming more, I guess I was angry, I was more testy. Little things could trigger me off, and they weren't really sure what was going on. So when they finally found out that it was bullying, by this point Mom came pick me up from school one day, and I had got to the point where I tried jumping out of the vehicle going down the highway. I said I had enough. And so we talked when we got home. I went through some counseling. Twice a week I met with a counselor. I spent many hours in my youth pastor's office and just talked with him and just cried and talked and tried to figure out what I was going through and what was happening. We tried to figure out some strategies, what I could use. And I was involved in 4-H, so we had to do the 4-H competition. So I wrote a speech on what my brain injury was, diffuse axonal injury, what it was about, what I'd gone through, what my accident was, how it happened. And then I talked a little bit on the bullying, but I didn't really want to get into it. Afterwards, the judges came up to me and said, "Austen, this is amazing. You need to take this a little bit further. There's a need in the community to hear the story." So.
And it's a story that you share now. It's a story that's maybe a little bit more extreme than many other Albertans. But Big Brothers Big Sisters Canada conducted a survey that was done by Harris Decima. It found that 52% of Albertans were bullied as a child or teenager, and that compares nationally to 50% of Canadians. Kari, those numbers seem surprisingly high. Is the problem as bad as those numbers present?
I absolutely think so. In some cases, I've done some research, and when you initially see it, you think, wow, that's really high. But I've heard almost as high as 77% of kids and youth have gone through bullying in schools.
And how extensive is that bullying, though? We heard Dr. Schwartz defining bullying from his perspective. Does that cover that wide range of numbers?
It does. And what we don't know, and what I actually had questions about as well, was how many times did this take place? Was this a one-time incident, or was it over time repeated like Austen had experienced in his school? So
Kelly, given the amount of attention that bullying receives now in the media, as well as from organizations, from government response, it would seem that bullying has become a bigger problem than it maybe was decades ago. Is that in fact the case?
Well, it's a good question. It's funny you ask. I just came back from a conference specific to adolescents in the U.S. and certainly it's a hot topic now. It's on the top of everybody's minds. If you're a parent, you think about it. It's in the news. You know, from an empirical social scientific perspective, we haven't looked at bullying strategically for more than about 20 years. The numbers that we're getting now seem to be a little higher. That could be because of, again, the way that we're defining bullying is different than we did 25, 30 years ago. I don't know that the evidence says that bullying is increasing. Sadly, though, it's not decreasing, and I think that's a bit troubling, given that we certainly have been giving attention to it in the past 8-10 years, and the fact that we're not seeing a rapid decline is troubling for sure.
Austen, when I was a younger lad, closer to your age, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were no anti-bullying programs. It was just part of growing up. Is it as bad in Alberta now as it maybe was before? Is it worse?
Bullying's always been a really bad issue. It's always been there. I just think now we have more forms of it. We have more ways that other kids can bully other kids. 20 years ago, there wasn't cyberbullying. There wasn't a wall that kids could hide behind to make fun of other kids. There's more forms of it. So what comes with more forms is there's more ways we need to learn to deal with it. There's not every bully situation is ever going to be the same. So it makes it really difficult when every situation isn't the same, and we have to learn how to deal with cyberbullying, how to deal with physical bullying, mental bullying, psychological bullying. It's all has to have its own system. Mm-hmm. But
well, that is where we will take the conversation next. When we return, what are the best ways to combat bullying? Is it time to take a harder line? Tell us what you think. Follow the contact links at albertaprimetime.com. Back with our panel in 60 seconds.
I would say that there probably is a big issue with bullying at all levels in our culture.
In some respects, we encourage it because there's so much of a spotlight on it.
I think it's actually a pretty predominant problem, even in the smallest form.
You're seeing like less bullying in person and more bullying online, which is even more dangerous.
I know of a lot of like young kids, little cousins and stuff like that have a hard time with it still, so it's still a pretty big issue.
So some thoughts there from Albertans on the prevalence of bullying in our province. Kari, we touched on it very briefly before the break, cyberbullying. How has it altered the landscape? Are we more sensitive to bullying now because of that?
I don't know. We see it more. Definitely, cyberbullying is the #1 form of bullying that we have with our kids in our programs. And it's the hardest to manage with the kids in our programs because it is the form of anonymity, and we might not know who is doing the form of bullying. And they can post it online, and we don't necessarily know the name. And then there's websites like thedirty.com that are out there that kids are posting to, and there might not be truth. It's gossip, rumors.
So it's more aggressive?
It's more aggressive, absolutely.
Kelly, how has public perception of bullying maybe changed in the past few decades, especially now that we have cyberbullying to contend with as well?
Yeah, I think, as Kari was saying, we're just more acutely aware of it. You know, it's more, at the conference again, we got talking about how one reason it's more prominent is because, you know, it used to be what we call kind of the bathroom wall bullying. Somebody writes something on there and you'd have to physically go in to see something. Now with technology and cyberbullying, the power to promote the negativity is really strong, and the effects of cyberbullying Whether it's more prevalent or not than traditional bullying, I think the jury is still out on that. But the effects of it are more acute, and it's more long-lasting because I think of just the number of people that are now aware that you are being bullied and the shame that goes along with that.
Alberta has a number of anti-bullying programs like the Safe and Caring Schools Initiative, Alberta Prevention of Bullying Youth Committee, Austen, which you are a proud member of, and even today you were at a luncheon with a premier. Congratulations on being recognized for that initiative. How does bullying affect a young person? Short term, long term?
Bullying has its short-term effects. The target gets angry, they get upset, they lose their self-esteem, they lose their inner strength. But it has long-term effects. So if you bully somebody, you can see it coming out in their personality 50 years down the road. They could still be that shy person and go into their shell. But it not only harms the target, it harms the bully just as much, if not more. But I know when I was going through it, it not only harmed me, but when I came back to school the second time to go through bullying, I ended up getting to the point where I had stroke-like symptoms, was taken to the U of A. And my grandmother was to meet me there. And she could understand how a motorcycle accident could take a life or change a life, but she couldn't understand how simple teasing could cause me to not be able to feel my legs. So it has effects on not only the target, but your entire family, everyone that's around you. It's very, very hurtful.
So mental as well as, in your
mental
case,
as well as
physical as well. Here in Alberta, we referenced this in the primer, Bill 2, the Education Act. It contains an anti-bullying provision which reads, refrain from, report, and not tolerate bullying or bullying behavior directed toward others in the school, whether or not it occurs within the school building during the school day or by electronic means. Kelly, is legislating against bullying the way to go?
Well, we don't. I'm pretty certain to say we don't have evidence to say that the legislation is going to make a big change. I think having statutes like that are public and across multiple domains, both health, education, other areas of our, kind of our province-wide legislature is great. We don't know, I think, if that's going to have long-term effects or not. But I do think that, in fact, I don't know if you saw the newest Maclean's has the opening editorial is on legislation regarding anti-bullying, and it's, again, the results are equivocal. I think it is important, though, to get the word out. Education is so important here, and making sure the right and correct evidence gets out is important, and if that can get through in things like the School Act, that's great.
Kari, there was another survey that said 58% of Albertans would support criminalizing bullying, making it part of the criminal code, very harsh punishment. Is that an effective route?
I'm not sure that that's more reactive, and I think we need to go more to the preventative aspects of bullying. So providing mentors, providing outlets for both the bully and the kids that are getting bullied. So more the preventative as opposed to reaction.
So take more of an educational
Absolutely.
approach to it.
Yeah. And that's my opinion.
Austen, weigh in on this.
Bullying, you definitely need your mentors. You need as much mentoring and counseling and support for your target as you do for the bully. The bully needs just as much support, if not more. They need to understand what they're doing is wrong and why they're doing it is wrong. But there does need to be that discipline to show that it's not gonna carry on from there. Like the bully needs to learn. If you go into a store and you pick up a candy bar and walk out, well, it's theft. So there needs to be it's got to have a line where this is bullying. And it's got to be a repeated offense. Bullying is a repeated offense. So if somebody comes up to you and pushes you up against the locker, well, they could just be having a bad day, or it's a rude comment they made. But if it's repeated, then it crosses into bullying.
Kelly, we give you last word on this, sir. Prevention versus punishment.
Yeah.
You prefer that as well?
For sure. I'm really excited to hear what Austen was saying about, we're concerned about victims. We're also concerned about bullies. These are our kids. These are kids in our schools and on our hockey teams. The interesting evidence that's now coming out is that kids who are bullied are more likely to become bullies themselves. So we can't forget that there is this kind of continuum of bullying that we need to address. And I'm all for kind of a strengths-based approach to addressing the issue of bullying. Literacy, like social literacy, developing empathy in children, that's where we're going to see the difference in 10 or 15 years. It may not be immediate, but I think we can definitely have long-term impact that way.
With time comes change. Thank you all for your perspectives this evening. Kari Readman is part of the service delivery team with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Edmonton. Austen Radowits is a member of the Alberta Prevention of Bullying Youth Committee. And Dr. Kelly Schwartz is a registered psychologist and director of the University of Calgary's Applied Psychological and Educational Services.